In Brazil and Argentina, there's plenty of land available for further production. There has been a quite significant increase in soybeans production in that region, and also that there has been some competition in terms of land use with the beef industry, but we don't think that that's going to constrain production increase in that region. So we expect that over the next 5 years or so, we will continue to see quite a significant increase in soybeans production out of that region. Now, those are the supply side issues that we are monitoring and researching into, and that obviously will have an impact on price movements, because that means the scope for supply increase, at least in the next few years, is quite significant. Now, on the demand side, I mentioned about U.S. ethanol production, and because they're using maize for ethanol production, that has led to a tightening of the supply situation and resulting in higher prices. But the subsidy and tariff on ethanol in the United States have expired in December, and there's no more subsidy and tariff on ethanol production and imports, but the mandate stays. So one can expect under that situation, perhaps ethanol production, the growth of ethanol production in the United States may not necessarily match what we have been observing over the past several years. So we expect that the ethanol production in the United States perhaps will only grow modestly, not very significantly in the foreseeable future. Of course, one underlying assumption would depending on world oil price movements. If oil prices increase very significantly, then that may providing more scope for ethanol production in the United States. But that's really a risk factor in our central scenario. I also mentioned about feed demand growth in the Asian countries, and as you can see, my apologies, there seems to be some problems with the slides. Now, I can tell you that the highness, the bar, which over 8% growth, or close to 8% growth over the period, is China, and the next one is non-OECD Asia. Now, there will be increased feed demand because of a preference change due to income growth to consume more protein-based products or agricultural products in those countries, but perhaps that will come relatively slowly and won't really make a very significant impact in the short term. Now, come to the last part, our views in terms of Australian production. I also put a few dot points here so that I can share with you to center our discussion on those issues. Firstly, is that seasonal conditions support recent national production. Let me qualify that. I mean, we understand there are floods now in certain parts of New South Wales and also Queensland, and that will create hardship for farmers in some regions. But our view is that if we look at nation as a whole, that perhaps won't significantly impact on the national production, because we do know winter crop were mostly harvested before the floods came, and naturally summer crops focus in southern Queensland and northern New South Wales, there will be impact, but perhaps the impact could be localized. At this stage, we don't have a precise estimate on the impact on production. That's because we need to wait until the water subsides to make an assessment. From last year's experience, some summer crops may not necessarily all die when they, when there are floods. When they submerge in water, depending on how long they be submerged in water, they can still survive better than previously expected. So it's very difficult at this stage to put a precise estimate on the damage. And also, when we did our production impacts due to floods last year, we didn't incorporate any on-farm infrastructure damages or off-farm infrastructure damages. Our assessments were mainly on production losses. So at this stage, we have not revised our forecast for summer crops due to lack of precise information. Of course, over the next couple of weeks, we will be closely monitoring the situation. Now, as I mentioned earlier, given the improved seasonal condition, we do expect there will be higher protein wheat production increase in this season. So that perhaps will link with my earlier comments about the gap between high protein wheat prices and other variety of wheat prices on the world market converging. Over the medium term, we see there are a few issues. Firstly, is competition for land. And then the next one will be any significant increase in production perhaps will have to come from productivity growth. Let me elaborate a bit more using a few more slides. Firstly, let me present you with our winter crop production. As I mentioned, the seasonal conditions have improved production prospects significantly. So for this season, we estimated there has been a significant increase in terms of winter crop production for Australia as a whole. In fact, our estimates demonstrate that almost in every state there has been an increase, especially in Western Australia. The improved seasonal condition has resulted in a significant increase, certainly make a significant difference when you compare last season's harvest, which was affected by drought. As I mentioned, summer crop production, we are still relatively optimistic. We think, say, the floodings may cause some damage, localized damage. At this stage, we still think that the summer crop production will rise by about 18% for this season. But as I said, we'll be closely monitoring the situation and make assessment in terms of the impact of floods on the production. Talking about medium-term issue, competition for land, we do not expect the land planted to grains and oil seeds over the medium term will increase significantly. In fact, we think that there could be some competitions from the sheep industry for land because relatively favorable prices for sheep meat, and also there has been an improvement in wool prices. So there could be some shifting back, but whether that will be very significantly, I think it would depend on how much transitional costs for changing your enterprise that will dominate in that. If there will be significant infrastructure investments, then the speed of any switching enterprise mix perhaps will not be very quickly happen, and perhaps will not be very significantly. But in summary, we don't really expect that the area planned to grains and oil seeds will increase significantly in the foreseeable future. So which means any production will have to come from productivity increase. And I present here our estimates of total factor productivities for cropping specialists. And we estimate over the past 3 or 4 decades, the industry has been able to achieve an average growth rate of around 1.6%. So if you're taking the productivity growth as a kind of a measure and taking into account of a possible competition for land, so the baseline for medium-term production increase perhaps will be around or slightly above 1% a year. That concludes my short presentation. Thank you.